本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。What's good, Internet? It's Monday, March 23rd, 2020, and you are listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 301. I'm your host, Austin Walker, and I'm joined by Rob Zachney.
How's it going? I'm sorry, I'm just staring dumbstruck at Twitter today.
Today? Just today?
Just today. Patrick Klepek.
So we just had to do 300 episodes to summon a new Half-Life game. So 300 to go, and then what do we need to put in the summoning circle next?
Oh God, this is what it's cost the world to get the next Half-Life game. I don't know what the next numbered sequel, if we'll have what it takes. Cado here on the line with us.
Hi.
And special guest, Emanuel Maiberg, joining us from, I almost said Motherboard HQ, but is that just partially your bedroom now?
It is, yeah. Motherboard HQ is my bedroom now.
Various parts of Brooklyn.
That's always been the administrative headquarters of Motherboard, is I understand. Given the timing of emails and the content about like payroll follow-up and such.
Yeah.
Like my suspicion is like Motherboard, like administrative command is pretty much right there, possibly in that bed.
This is the Politburo kind of part of the administration. Yeah.
I got you, yeah. Well, we had you on partially because of what we kind of said up top, which is there's a new fucking Half-Life game. And I think, Rob, you suggested Emanuel as the office's foremost, the in-office foremost Half-Life fan and expert. I'm not putting Patrick out, but Patrick isn't, in the I guess no one's in the office right now, so what the fuck am I talking about? But that Emanuel also has a history with the Half-Life series, and with Half-Life Alyx, the embargo coming down, I think, as we speak, right? It's like just about now.
It's a couple hours from now from where we're recording,
okay.
But it'll probably happen at some point during the recording of this podcast.
I felt like, I agreed with Rob that maybe you should come on and we could all grill Patrick about Half-Life Alyx.
Half-Life, Emanuel's, let's just be clear, Emanuel's the Half-Life stan who then messaged me this morning and said, hey, I'm not going to play this for like a year because you just spoiled the ending for me, which I've been proceeding to do.
That's a type of stan. That's it's not everyone has
I
to
respect it.
experience
It was like, look, it's going to get spoiled for you anyway. Why not get spoiled early?
By a friend.
I think Austin is also like this, but I am not like a spoiler person. I just like want to know the information. I don't care. Especially knowing that I won't be able to play it for a very long time. I really, really want to know what happened in the game.
That's the anti-fascist position.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, if I know I'm not going, if it's something that's like on my horizon and I'm going to like get to it in the near future, I'd rather not know because I'd rather see how they lay things out. But if I know or if it's actually the opposite for me, it's just like if I only care about something a little bit, I want those spoilers instantly. When Avengers Endgame came out, give me those spoilers. I got to know immediately. I don't really care about this, but I kind of care about it. I want to know. I'm just, that curiosity.
But then Star Wars came along and Austin is shaking his stick in our Discord channels and like, shut the fuck up!
Shut the fuck up! I want to suffer
and how does
by
that
myself.
Work out?
Great. I only had to suffer once. The one time I went to see the movie instead of sitting on those feelings and then also seeing the movie. It was bad. That movie fucking sucks. Talk to me about Half-Life Alyx. Patrick.
I thought you were referring to someone named Alyx.
Alyx,
talk to me about,
line.
hey Alyx, what's up with Half-Life?
Yeah, Half-Life Alyx is Valve's new VR game. It is a prequel set between the events of, before the events of Half-Life 2. So it is not something that immediately picks up on what people have been waiting more than a decade for. I think episode 2 came out in 2007, I want to say. That's right. In which, in terms of all-time cliffhangers, episode 2 sets the bar pretty high, especially given the fact that they just walked away from answering it after announcing a sequel that they fully intended to presumably to finish out, and it didn't happen. And so in the time since where Valve has not really touched Half-Life at all, sort of like as I put in my review, like at a certain point it seemed like Half-Life Episode 3 became Half-Life 3 through sheer distance. And at the point that it became Half-Life 3, like what that needed to be given the burden of expectations that Valve has put on themselves for like each iteration, right? Like Half-Life 1, it's one of its great, sort of quote innovations was, like a sort of cinematic flair. Like it felt like you were playing a story, like you were in a real world in a shooter that was mostly dominated by games like Doom and Quake and stuff like that. And then Half-Life 2, making it, its physics is redundant, but it's that game is built around certain like core ideas that it builds out from there. And so then the question seemed to always become well, what is Half-Life 3 if it can't just be, we're finishing out the lore? That seems like that wouldn't be enough. And so Alyx sort of hits a reset button, not in a sort of like lore sense. It is very much still set in this world, but it takes a lot of canonical aspects of Half-Life, the chat, the very like iconic chatter of Combine soldiers or the head crab creature, and tries to drop them in a totally different context. Because what do you do with something that an audience is deeply familiar with? And now is not just like familiar because they played games, but like it's like Half-Life is in some ways like this ancient institution that is looked back on and revered. And that is, I think has been part of the reason Valve has avoided it, because how do you answer that? And Alyx's answer is basically like, what if we hit the reset button and recontextualized how people experience this world, which gives us a chance to play with it differently than just what Half-Life 3 would have been, which is just, it's just like a higher fidelity, like more levels, more lore. Like Alyx sits and hits that reset button by putting you into the world through a VR headset and changing the context in which your actions play out in the world itself. And I think it's very good.
That's a good thing to hear, given the kind of rhetorical stakes of it. I've always had kind of a weird thing with Half-Life, which is that it has such a rabid fan base. It has such a fan base with such high expectations that really, really, really loves the game. But also, it never saw the sort of cultural penetration that like Call of Duty Modern Warfare did. Right? It never had the like, this has taken over games in the as the game that people go and buy. It does not have Grand Theft Auto numbers. And
it didn't hit consoles. Like there were console ports of Half-Life.
Yes.
Like Half-Life 1 came to the Dreamcast. But it like the orange box was a huge fucking deal at the time, because it was like, oh shit, like I can play Half-Life on my console, which seems like in 2020 where everything comes out everywhere at the same time seems like quaint, but was like, it's easy to forget like how big of a deal the orange box was at the time. And that's what makes the lack of an episode 3 all the like wilder. It's like, cool, Half-Life is having its moment. Like, here comes the next one. And then just
well, and this is going in the opposite direction in a sense, right? Because Emanuel's not going to play this for a year. I don't think I'm going to play this ever, probably, based on how sick I get in VR most of the time. This is going to an even more limited audience in some ways. Do you think that, like, having played through it, do you think that, like, the vision here was strong enough that they should have focused and built this cool VR game over figuring out some other Half-Life side story that, like, Emanuel could play today? Or do you think it was just you think that was just like impossible at this point, given the expectations?
Yeah, it's hard. I can't. I haven't done like the reporting to like, but I think you could, like, from an outsider looking in, it definitely seemed like they were paralyzed in terms of what they should or shouldn't make, and then just chose to not make it. And Alyx, I think, sidesteps that by saying, "What if we could basically start from scratch?" And right. I was skeptical of the. I was not skeptical that they couldn't make something cool in VR. I'm a huge VR advocate. I love playing in VR. So I was the kind of, when they said RE7 was going to be, I played all of RE7 in VR, and I think it's a better game in VR. I think it's a much scarier game in VR. So I was excited to see what Valve would do in there. But like, I was concerned, like you, that, it's kind of a bummer. Like, there are tons of fans who have waited so long to return to this world, and absent a expensive headset, even in the most, the rosiest scenario of using even the cheaper of the headsets, it's still buying another console basically to attach to a PC that needs to be decently high end. Mine ran okay on low settings. Like, VR gets away with low fidelity because of the way you interact with those worlds. It doesn't need to be like at ultra settings to be beautiful. Like, Alyx is a beautiful game, and I played it on because even with the Index, I played on Valve's high-end headset. It's still pixelated, right? Like they have the nicest, glossiest screen, but you can still tell if you squint, like like it's not crystal clear, like I'm looking at a television set. But I think the gamble pays off. I think it absolutely works. I know, Emanuel, you've been trying to jump in here a couple times with.
I was trying to respond to Austin's comparison to Call of Duty, and I would say that I would argue that Half-Life had similar penetration if you count Counter-Strike, which to me was always like the multiplayer, like the real multiplayer mode for Half-Life. And also
Half-Life DM was just there because that's all that was in the box, and I loved going around spray painting decals around environments. But Counter-Strike is actually Half-Life's multiplayer mode.
Right. And Half-Life 2 also had a weird deathmatch mode that I actually messed around with a bunch because you could kill people by throwing toilets at them or crushing them
You
with
could bring
cars.
the gravity gun was like one of the main ways to play in that.
Yeah.
That was really neat.
I mean, I
pretty
think it's
fun.
even.
Yeah.
I think it's even fair to go broad. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I do think something weird happened with just the cultural moment where games began to penetrate mainstream culture more around the time the Orange Box came out. Modern Warfare was the one that became this like phenomenon that a lot of like becomes a thing that mainstream media even pay attention to. People make like reference to it. But the weird thing is, just because of the way the timing worked out, I do feel like it was Portal that ended up having the slightly greater cultural cachet than Half-Life. I think in part because Half-Life Episode 2 was really, really good. Maybe like the most distilled Half-Life experience they ever made, but it was still like Episode 2, right? Like
I had to get through that. I had to get through that boat section of Half-Life 2 first to get there, and I just didn't in 2007 because in 2007 I could go play BioShock and Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and then in 2008 I could go play Far Cry 2. Like, and actually, ironically, maybe this is the blessing of Half-Life is neither of them. It didn't become either BioShock or Far Cry, right? Like when you look at the first-person shooter franchises of 2007, 2008, you look at BioShock, Call of Duty, Far Cry, and Half-Life. Half-Life is the one that like it ends gracefully. It ends before its really ludicrous final season. Meanwhile, Far Cry has become this terrible, like existential threat to good grace and smart writing. Like it's a nightmare series at this point, and maybe Gabe and them made the right call. We're like, let's pump the brakes on this. We can't go down this road.
Yeah, and so one thing I want to make clear that I've watched the trailers, I read a couple of interviews, but I wasn't like following Alyx very closely because I am someone that like enjoys the surprise and is spoiler averse because I just enjoy experiencing things in the moment. So if there's something that I'm really excited for, I don't go all like trailer blackout, but I wasn't like going out of my way to consume everything I could read about what Alyx was and what to expect. And this is a horror game. Like it's not. There are moments you spend like above the surface and in the sun and you fight some Combine soldiers, but like 90% of this game is as though a bunch of folks looked at Ravenholm and said, it'd be good if we just made like a whole game based on Ravenholm. And
that would be good.
Yeah, it would be. And this is great.
That's the best part of that game.
There are sequences in this game. And I'm a horror aficionado. I have seen it all. It takes a lot to get under my skin. It's part of why I like horror in VR because the way it drops you into these worlds, like takes things that otherwise would not be necessarily scary on a screen or, even though I have a big projector in my house, like, it's like I've seen it enough times. Once you put it in VR, even simple familiar things become terrifying all over again. And I don't want to spoil what exactly happens, but there's the introduction of a specific enemy type, the sort of like tarantula head crab. I guess it's like the poison head crab, but it's like the head crab that has little hairs coming out of it and acts even more spider-like than the normal head crab. I had to physically calm myself down. Like I had to slow my breathing. I had to like audibly tell myself like everything's fine. You're okay. Like you're playing a video game. It was just unbelievable terror. And those moments are frequent. It's because like how they recontextualized everything was they slowed it all down. And a horror game gives you a chance to just like slow the pace down. And VR works best at slower paces because, especially in a game where you're moving constantly. So there are a couple different what are they called, locomotion options, but basically how you move around in the space. I stuck with the default. I didn't even fuck around with the other ones. The one that is the default is you point at the ground and a little icon shows up of your feet. You can twist the controller so you can always be sure where you're going to be facing when that teleportation happens. Something Alyx does that not every game that has teleportation does is that you actually see yourself move in that direction. Like you don't just like blink and then you're there. Like you do, but you actually see yourself move through that space. It's very subtle, but if you pay attention to like what's happening there, it eliminates a lot of the disorientation and nausea that would normally go along with a system like that. And not every game includes the ability to change your perspective. I think it's also like a limitation of controllers too. I think everything that it's compatible with, I played an Index, but it'll work on a wide variety of headsets. But it's like you can aim across the room and make sure that because like let's say you see an enemy that you want to immediately line up and start shooting at, you can see that little animated foot appear at the other side of the screen. Twist your hand so that you're facing to the right, so that you can like immediately pull out your gun and shoot. And all that stuff works fine. It's a little awkward. It's like weird during like chase sequences. There's only like a couple of them, but like there's like one in particular towards the end where you're like running through a bunch of buildings that are blowing up, and it's just like point, go, point, go, point, go. Like it just loses a little bit. Like it's one of the few sequences of the game where I went, all right, you guys didn't really totally think through like how this feels in the moment. Like I storyboarded, I see how this whatever is attacking me, and like it sounds bombastic, and in the moment it was just kind of like, yep, I'm just scooting through here, like as I make my way to the other end. But like the way in my review I tried to capture how they recontextualize things is like the head crab. So that is like if you were to, other than the crowbar, or I guess there's a lot of iconic imagery from Half-Life, even if you don't play the series. But the head crab is very much one of them. And like the moment, like any horror villain, like at the moment they're making plush dolls of you, like the familiarity has reached a point where you're no longer scary anymore. And like the head crab, conceptually scary, right? A little spider-like flesh monster that rears its arms up, leaps at you so that it can attach itself to your brain and suck your brain juice is scary on paper. But when you've fought, thousands of them at this point, like it sort of loses its luster in game, no matter what kind of fidelity you attach to it and what kind of production values. And so what happens in Alyx is, well, suddenly now you're not aiming a cursor or a reticle attached to a gamepad. Like you're putting your hand up to aim, and the pistol that you get at the start of the game, before there's any upgrades attached to it, is very difficult to aim. I for sure thought I had my shots lined up, and no. And it at times it was frustrating, but it was a kind of good frustrating because it reflected a character, Alyx, who is just getting kind of thrown into the shit and not a seasoned soldier. This is just someone who is just getting by in City 17. And so you missing shots makes some sense. And when you encounter, like, say, a head crab, they're skittering towards you, and you have about a second and a half before they leap at you. And what will often happen is you're like, cool, it takes about 3-4 shots to put one of them down. It's like you line it up, like, chink, chink, chink. It's like, oh, the 2 more shots landed, but the third one didn't. I need to reload. That thing is now screaming at you through the sky, and as opposed to being a monitor that's a foot away or a television that's hanging on your wall, like it's this screen that is plastered to your face, and it's like much different to have something that wants to suck your brain juice leaping at your actual face. And the extension of that for the sort of like interactive elements is, okay, so let's say you manage to get away, right? Like you turn away, you teleport to the side, you're now hiding behind a wall. You can hear it skittering off in the distance. And like, okay, I need to reload. Well, you don't hit R, you hit a button that drops a clip to the ground. Then you take your hand and you put it physically behind your back. You grab your back to pull out a clip. You take that clip, you shove it in to the gun. You're like, cool, I'm ready to go. Well, occasionally you're going to actually have to pull back on the, what do they call it? The
Chamber?
slip?
The receiver, the
Receiver, you know, the thing.
the slide,
The slide.
The slide is right. The slide is right.
And so it's like you'll put in that magazine, and more than once I would turn around to line up and shoot. Click, 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 like nothing's coming out. Oh fuck, because I didn't pull back the slide. And so it's like teleport away, like try and dodge out of that head crab, going for my face again. Pull back the slip, turn over, like fire the shots. It's just that physicality is a huge part of what makes combat work. Combat is like brief, fleeting, and terrifying. It like encounters are meant to be something that you dread. Encounters are meant to be something that you're not excited for. And they just do the pacing of the game is terrific. I'm so like loath to spoil some of like the mechanical surprises of how they find ways to keep you on your toes. You know, there's, you know, there for, I guess in the vaguest possible way, there's sort of like a tyrant type enemy that you encounter at one point who you cannot kill, but you can only distract with noise. And so you're spending a lot of your time grabbing bottles and like trying to accomplish tasks while turning your, like physically, like let's say holding with your left hand onto some object that you're interacting with, turning your whole body around, holding a bottle in your right hand, lining up how you're going to throw this over into the corner to distract it, turning back, interacting with this object for another half second or so, turning back around. And one of the main interaction elements in the game is, this has been featured in other VR games. It's not new to Alyx, but basically you have these like, gravity gloves, and the objects in the environment you can interact with start to hover or color orange, and also it vibrates. So you'll always know like things you can interact with, and you hold the trigger button, and then you flick the controller to you, and it comes over to you, and you have to physically grab it in the air. It doesn't automatically go to your hand, and so you'll be like watching this creature stalk you, screaming, and then you're throwing these bottles to distract it. And if it gets too close to you, but close enough that it hasn't detected you, it gives out these spores that make you cough. And the way you stop yourself from coughing is by physically putting your hand up to your mouth. And so there are sequences where you're trying to sneak around this creature, and the flashlight is attached to your, well, in my case, I'm right-handed, so it's in my left hand. I think it switches up based on your hand orientation. But like, try to imagine where, okay, I've got my right hand over my mouth, and I'm covering. I've got my left hand with the flashlight, and then I'm slowly like moving around and like having to keep covering my mouth so my character doesn't cough, so I don't alert this creature. And it's just, there are just so many moments like that throughout where they just thought, they were so thoughtful about what does it mean to be in this world? What does it mean when we're giving you these different interaction tools? What are the new verbs you're going to have? And this game it takes a lot of existing verbs from VR games. Like, it feels like a culmination of a lot of work that has happened collectively in VR design over the last couple of years, and then polishes them and puts them in really cool design spaces in a way that's just, this game doesn't, you put this in a keyboard and mouse, like the game doesn't work. Like, it just absolutely doesn't. It would be beautiful. It'd be fun to run around in, like from an aesthetic standpoint, but mechanically it would fall apart. It's not tuned to that. And there's really just nothing like, another sequence I described in the review was like tossing grenades is just such an incredible thing, because it's like you're throwing little bowling balls, and like you're like leaning around corners, like tossing these grenades. Like, there was this one sequence where I was scaling a building, like, you know, kind of shuffling along the side, and then you get up to a window and there's two handles. So I pull the handles up. There's 3 zombies inside. They turn around and look at me, and I shove those handles down. I'm like, okay, what the fuck am I gonna do here? It's like, okay. I got a grenade. Okay, so I pull the grenade out. I crouch down physically. I crouch down in my office, and then pull them up. Click the button that triggers the grenade. Lightly toss it in. Close the window back down, and then like back off so I can like avoid some of like the grenade damage that like can sometimes bleed through the window. And it's just stuff like that there are a billion of those moments like scattered throughout, and a lot of them are going to depend on the way the physics work in or not in your favor. I mean, there's nothing cooler than a Combine soldier throwing a grenade at you, catching it midair, and like just tossing it back at them. Like, other games have had that, but it's so different to do it with your hand. So yeah, it's very good.
Rob looked euphoric for a moment during some of that description. Any thoughts to add, Rob?
Well, no, I mean the bit about having to suppress a cough is kind of a brilliant touch, but I'm also like, the thing that I have trouble wrapping my mind around, or that I need you to reassure me, or I just need to play this thing for myself, is like little things like that. Does that feel like, okay, this is kind of goofy artifice, this is dumb, or does it put you more in the moment to be like walking around with your hand in front of your mouth while this thing is hunting you? Like, do you feel like you're inhabiting the character more, or does it feel like a goofy?
No,
bit
it's
of
goofy,
artifice?
but in a good way. It's them acknowledging like some of the design like potential space of VR, but they don't overdo it, right?
Yeah.
This is not something you do constantly. You do it a handful of times so that they correctly identify what things are novel simply for the sake of being novel because of what you're doing physically, and then what is novel and that is like really fun to play with over and over again, right? So like also in the review is this sequence where there's no way to get forward except for there's a bunch of explosives in another room, and there's a vent that leads into that room, and in front of you are like 15 grenades. And it's like, why are there 15 grenades here? And it's like, oh, because I need to throw this grenade into that vent, which sounds like you've done this in a video game plenty of times. You just aim that cursor. But really what you need to do is accomplish a free throw. Like you're stepping up to the line and you're shooting. Like I was thinking back to being in elementary school and like, all right, how do you have to line your elbow up and then you just kind of flick your wrist like this in order to get the arc properly. And I'd shoot it and just watch it like, because you'd have to trigger it first, right? So I'm like, clink, and like red, blink, 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 and like 1, 2, whoop. And then just like watch it like arc way too high, very familiar to me as an elementary school basketball player, and just like clink off of the backboard and like fall harmlessly on the ground. And I sat there shooting like 10 grenades and just laughing the entire time. I was like, oh, they correctly identified how goofy this is, but how much of a delight it is to do as the player. And they downplay the stuff that is outright gimmicky. Like, yeah, the cough thing, if that was all the time, I probably did it 10 times in the game for like 5 seconds in a moment. Like it is exceedingly brief, but they recognize what's like inherently interesting about it without over harping on it.
That is, it seems interesting. I'm one of the things that hearing you talk about all this kind of brought into relief for me, and has made me curious, is like, is this the moment we're going to end up having a larger conversation around VR and disability? Because earlier I was like, oh, Emanuel can't afford. No, I'm not dragging your finances, Emanuel. I'm like, Emanuel doesn't have an elite VR setup. I could plug my Quest in, but that would be a worse experience because it's a Quest and not the Index. And also I get sick.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Like, I didn't touch any of them. Like, I'll be curious in the reviews and...
Right, yeah, who knows? Sorry, this isn't even my point. My point isn't about that. I know. Yeah, like regardless, I have a hard time playing VR games because I get like motion sick pretty quickly. But there's there's a huge population of people who presumably have figured out ways to play Half-Life that were not necessarily intended by Valve, using different input mechanisms, using mods, using other stuff, for whom VR is just like motion controls aren't on the table for them. And I'm curious to see if this creates that conversation, because I've been wondering if that conversation would happen at some point anyway. But this seems to be like the sort of game that the stories you told are so exciting, and it sucks that there's like a huge audience that just is like, no, I'm not going to have access to this thing. And that's not a drag on Valve or anything necessarily, but it is just, I wanted to voice it because it's at the forefront of my thought right now.
Yeah, I'm not, there are accessibility options in the game. I can't speak to those. I didn't spend a huge amount of time, playing with the options there. My hope would be, right, is that, it starts the conversation in a direction of like, okay, so like Valve like made a baseline of like, this is what we were going for in the game. This is what we wanted to accomplish. And then hopefully what would happen next is a conversation of like, okay, so this is sort of like the baseline experience of like what we designed around so we could build the game. Now we start building in a structure that allows you to interact with the game differently, that is accommodating of whatever
Of
you
other
need.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would hope I don't.
It's interesting because there's just I can think of all sorts of different possible types of accommodation that range from adjusting how much you're like, because right now it's trying to map your hands 1-to-1, right? But I could imagine a world in which, hey, maybe you don't need to rotate your arm all the way to make this rotate as much as you need to in the game. There are ways to start trying to tackle those things, and I'm curious if Valve or someone else will. The other thing that came to mind here is going back to something Emanuel said, which is that if you count Counter-Strike as Half-Life 1's multiplayer, it had a huge impact, and it's not just Counter-Strike, right? Like, it was Counter-Strike, Day of Defeat, Team Fortress Classic, The Specialists, what's
Day of Defeat was like the World War One.
The ship,
right?
yeah. The ship, which is like not even a combat game. In a way, the thing that Half-Life 1 did was become a platform, which Valve has become very comfortable being. That is what they are.
They're a company that is more platform than game developer.
The developer at this point. I'm curious if there's any signal that this would be a platform in the same way in terms of mod support, or have they communicated anything around what the future of Half-Life Alyx is, or like is it the next thing? Is it going to be Source for VR?
I know that there's a lot of excitement. I remember when this was announced, that was one of the issues is that. Or there was hope that by Valve getting so behind this and getting Source 2 behind this, that was going to open up a lot of doors in that way. I think that what they have said is that like mod support is something they actively are going to add into Alyx, but the last I had read, and I might be, again, because I wasn't like closely following the game on purpose, but I remember from a number of interviews, it sounded like, look, that we're historically a studio that supports their stuff for a long, long time. All that stuff is coming. It'll get proper mod support. You're going to be able to like fuck around with this in the way that you've fucked around with all of our games in the past. It's just not necessarily all going to be there like day one. And so I do think there is a timeline to getting that stuff in there, because that would be incredibly cool. Like just people making additional maps and scenarios, and like just taking the framework of what's here. Like there are incredible things that people could do with this baseline that I would be really excited to see people unpack. But I don't know that that's. It seems like that's in their plans, but not necessarily there on day one. I do want one of the things that's interesting that's in. I didn't play with this because my computer struggled already with the performance sometimes, let alone streaming it at the same time. But it has actual. And I'm sure this is true of other VR games, but like spectator setting. So like they actually redesigned the UI. So the UI that is broadcasted to a stream is different than the UI that is broadcast to the player, because a lot of what's happening for the player is, I can glance down at my wrist and see like through the corner. I don't have to glance down. I can look through the corner of my eye and see what my wrist your wrist is on your left hand is where like your health meter is. But the person watching that through the POV on the stream can't see all of that visual data because it's only showing you like a 16:9, what's in front of them. So they remapped the UI so it looks like more like traditional Half-Life, just flat 2D UI elements. And that's what the streamer sees, or the streaming audience sees, and it's fundamentally different than what the player sees. So, stuff like that is pretty interesting and smart, and I'm curious to see what people end up doing with it.
Patrick, as a Half-Life fan and someone who's been waiting to go back into this world in a new way.
Hold on, give me 2 seconds. We're gonna actually pause this podcast for 2 seconds.
If we're pausing, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Is that cool?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
In fact, let's just take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk some more about Half-Life, both Alyx and I suspect Black Mesa, because I know Emanuel's been playing that, and then some other stuff. Maybe Cado and I can do an Animal Crossing check-in. So we will be right back. All right, we're back with more about Half-Life. Emanuel, what was your question there before we had to take a quick break?
Yeah, so I think this is probably a basic question, so I apologize if it is, but I think it's what every Half-Life fan is wondering who can't play this game right now, and that is the mythology around Half-Life and Valve as a game developer is basically that the reason we haven't seen a new Half-Life game is that Valve didn't feel like they had a sufficiently revolutionary idea to support the continuation of the brand, the franchise. And it's like the first game was revolutionary in the way that it told stories, and the second game was revolutionary in its graphical fidelity at the time, the physics, stuff like that. I don't necessarily buy that narrative. Like, I don't think those games were as revolutionary as people say. I think they're like, I love them, they're very good, but I don't think that's like the appeal. But now that we do have a new game, do you feel like, did they find, is this
Does it feel revolutionary, or is it just a very good game?
Yeah, is it new? Is it did they redefine
no,
shooters or VR games, or
it just feels good to throw grenades? Is that the
it's
pitch?
just good? It's
like,
just good. It's good as hell. Like it's just a really good game, and I think that was also true.
Exactly.
Like, Half-Life and Half-Life 2 felt revolutionary in retrospect, right? Like, what does revolutionary mean? Like, sure, maybe it's possible we look back at Alyx as like a very important moment in time for VR design, or the excitement around Half-Life got so many people into VR that, you know, I think there was a thought that, oh, once VR comes along, there'll be big franchises that get in and, you know, get into it, and that'll like make like a mass culmination of interest. And like that hasn't really happened. There's been some scattered, you know, hey, here's a Kingdom Hearts VR experience. You want to look at a JPEG for like 20 minutes?
That's
so maybe
a 3D
that'll be
environment that you were in.
Yeah. 3D JPEGs, revolutionizing.
Rob wants to push back, I think, on some of this. Go ahead, Rob.
I've heard many things that I find objectionable here.
I'm opening. Let's open the floor. The chair here's Mr. Zachney.
First of all, Emanuel, I think you replaying these games so recently has actually misled you, my friend. I think you're looking at them now and you're saying, this doesn't seem all that revolutionary. And of course, now it doesn't. Every game's gone to school on each of these games for, you know, about 10 years, 20 years. But I do think certainly the first game was revolutionary in terms of how it told its how it told its story. Like, there's a discontinuity in FPS narrative design around Half-Life that exists because people basically saw a game that never broke, never changed levels, like it was seamless, and it had all these moments. Like, I do think that was revolutionary. It's just that its revolution became commonplace, and I think that's the thing that gets unkind to it.
Well, I think that didn't Quake 2 come out earlier? Didn't it come out before Half-Life 2?
Well, yeah, because it was a Quake 2 engine-derived game.
Right,
yeah.
so, but Quake 2 did a lot of what Half-Life did. It's just that Half-Life did it better.
Whoa!
Okay, you know what? There are takes, there are hot takes, and then there are what's happening right now. I'm gonna have to call my daughter down here. She's gonna scold you. Like, the story of the Strog?
No. It's not the story. It's the issue of continuity. It's like, to Rob's point, it's like up until Half-Life, people felt like games were broken into levels. Like, it's Doom, and I jump into a level, and I get the red key, and I get the yellow key, and then I push a button, and then we go to the next level. And what Half-Life did is it felt like one continuous world and one continuous space that felt real. And I agree, like, they did it very well, but Quake 2 was actually starting to do some of that. It's like, it didn't break it into levels. It's like, I'm going to this facility, and to get there, I have to go through this part of the base, and it's like, it was all one connected space.
But I think the ambitions are so different. Like, Quake 2 never has any interest in you buying that, like, you are in a place, that you are a person in a place where, like, things happen. Like, you're in a fucking Strog meat factory or whatever the fuck whatever they are. But it's very classic id design of, like, industry torture devices. Beyond that first level where you get guys screaming over the radio about, like, oh, the Strog are kicking our asses, the story doesn't really, like, there isn't much storytelling. Whereas I think Half-Life throughout it's that storytelling is part of the experience, right? Like, Quake pretty much after that first Quake 2, after that first level, basically sends you on your merry way and is like, go fuck up these monsters. And there we are, there's Quake. Whereas Half-Life is constantly breaking in and like saying, here's the next part of the story unfolding, right? Everyone's saying, the government's going to come and help us out.
Yeah.
Spoiler, they don't, and you see that play out very
I mean, I don't want to turn this into two old men arguing about
No, wait.
Quake 2.
It's going to be 3. It's going to be 3. Wait a second.
That's our new podcast. Two old men arguing
Wait
about
a second.
Quake 2.
If I can do the most Waypoint thing possible here.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm gonna hate this too.
Are you?
Because
Right.
I feel like there's an oblique hot take coming.
It's not a hot take. Well, it is.
All right.
It is.
It's not a hot take,
This is
but
Half-Life-
Austin's gonna get gravity assistance by traveling around like Jupiter, and he's gonna come back from a different angle.
I do. I have like 6 different wiki tabs open to check dates on things.
Wow.
Okay, go for it.
So, is it that Half-Life gets the credit for what the emerging immersive sim was already doing? System Shock. Yes, thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you. System Shock is out in
don't ever do that hand motion again.
System Shock is out in 1994. Ultima Underworld is out in 1992. But you don't have rocket launchers, dog. You don't get to just like shoot stuff. A month after Half-Life, guess what comes out, Rob? Thief. Yeah. Thief comes out a month after Half-Life. I'm not saying Half-Life isn't a good game, but Half-Life was lifting from an emerging space and making it an action game. But I don't know that stuff was revolutionary so much as revolutionary to the sorts of players who were not going to go play Ultima Underworld or System Shock 1, and who would go play System Shock 2, which came out the next year and was likely mid-development by November 1998, which is interesting because I think it might just actually be what we're doing is challenging what we think of as revolutions in video games, because in fact what happens is a big game comes out and everyone goes, that's the one that did it, when in fact there was it's what Patrick said about Half-Life Alyx, 20 minutes ago, which was that
a lot of its mechanics are
yes.
I was Matthew Galt was also playing this at the same time I was playing it, and like I was talking about, these mechanics are super cool. Like I haven't seen anything like this. He's like, yeah, like this was in Y, this was in X,
yep.
like this was in Z, and it's like it's just a very polished, really great take on all those dropped into massive production values and exquisite level design and pacing, but that it's not, there's individual component, and not that Valve didn't do its own work, and right, like it's not to take away from anything. Putting all that stuff together in that package is difficult in and of itself, but I think there is something to be said of like, yeah, like there is something in the air, and maybe one of the magics of Valve is their ability to culminate it.
Valve is the Apple of game developers.
I don't know if I go that far. I think that is.
Austin, also to Valve's credit, Austin, is that like at the time I was aware of those games and I tried to play them.
Right.
And at that point, like the age I was and like my interest and my attention span, it's like I thought they were cool. There was a reason I tried them, but I was like, it was too complicated. It was like too much.
No,
for
I
me.
get it.
Whereas Half-Life made it really accessible, like some of the same ideas, but like more accessible. Something I could like easily jump into and play.
And a cool ass sci-fi story.
Right. Yeah.
Like I fucking
System
love the
Shock
mythology of
1.
Half-Life.
Yeah.
No,
G-Man
I
is one of my
I
favorite
get you.
characters ever.
So, but I think here's a thing that I'm wondering about with Alyx, though, is I feel like with every VR game, every VR experience, there's always a huge but, right? Like, there was always a question of, okay, is this the one to justify both? A harder question is, like, is this the one to justify me getting this? Maybe the more direct question is this the one that justifies the decision to make a game in this medium, right? Does it do enough that you play this and it doesn't feel like a jankier or compromised version of something you'd have rather played in a more traditional format? Does it sort of stand on its own and feel like a good game on the merits that makes VR feel less like an intrusive presence in my relationship between me and the game? Like, does this get there?
Yeah, there's a reason they set it as a prequel. I think it was intentional because, for one, just to revisit Half-Life and say, cool, let's just pick up where we left off and like we'll just keep going. It just would have been strange. And by setting it in a prequel where the vast majority of the narrative is Alyx separated from all, like what's going on, like it feels it feels like a side story on purpose. We're like, cool, we can appropriate a bunch of Half-Life iconography and nostalgia without all of the pressure that goes into like pushing the ball forward. I think it justifies itself like absolutely. I mean, I don't the VR feels does not just feel like an add-on. It feels like it feels like it feels more like they came up with a bunch of cool ideas and then said, oh, what if we dropped this into Half-Life? As opposed to, let's make a Half-Life game, and then, oh, if we put it in VR, at least there's a spin on it. And it very much feels like the Half-Life part came later, and that they worked in how that would function within the trappings of Half-Life. Which is not to say this game, I'm very reluctant to say much about the mythology, except that long-time fans will be happy with things they experience in Alyx without getting into any details of what that is. But I had big smiles on my face throughout the game.
I think maybe the more pointedly I'm curious about, a thing I would run into with Track IR, for instance, is that thing would fall out of calibration a lot, right?
Yeah.
Where, it was a head tracker, but like at some point you'd be playing, you'd realize some sort of calibration drift had happened, and like things weren't quite lining up, and it suddenly you were taken out of the moment, the immersion was broken, and now you had to futz with a slightly jankier piece of hardware.
So this does happen all the time here. Like VR feels like we've come, like, even in the 5 years since like the original prototype of the Oculus Rift came out, like we've come incredibly far, but it just feels like we're also still incredibly far. Like the Quest is the mobile one, right? The mobile.
Yeah,
Oculus.
that's the one that's like completely, or it's not. No, it's not mobile. It's it's not the one you put the phone in or anything like that. It's just it's a totally standalone device.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it does feel like Half-Life Alyx ideally is meant to be played in a big open space where you can walk around and be sort of like unintruded by like the long cable that it has attached to the back of it is less of an issue because it's kind of like spread out on your floor. I have like a decent sized office where my PC is located, but it's not big enough. I tried to make the play space, which is like, where you map out the spot you can walk around in. It's just not particularly big. It's not much bigger than like the default circle they'll give you if it just like scans your room. And so I originally had the circle like right at my desk. I was like, cool, I'm going to play it at my desk. I'm going to do it sitting because although I could do it standing, I don't really want to stand for 20 hours. I think that most people are going to want to sit anyway, so I should try and do it more actualized to what the average person is going to try and do in their play session. And so for like the first 6 hours, I had the circle set right by my desk. But the problem is in Alyx, you are constantly moving. You are rotating your whole body. Like I was moving my office chair in circles without realizing it, and looking up and looking down and pressing forward. And what would happen is that the third time I like legitimately hurt my wrist because I like went to go throw a grenade and I was flicking my wrist because I was trying to put acceleration on it and just smashed it into my desk. Like one time I gave myself a cut because I just like hit the corner of the fucking desk. And I was like, all right, well, I don't want to do that again. So put a Band-Aid on and then like spent, 10 minutes like moving the circle further back. And then that got me away from hitting anything. But what would happen is that because I was rotating around so much, at least, in an hour, play session, at least twice, I would have to physically stop, take off the headset, like pick up my chair, unwind the cord from my desk. I've seen like there are solutions to this where it's like, it's been a while, but like there's a stand you can buy from IKEA that like the cord, you're supposed to put it behind you and then the cord like rests on it so that it's like, above the ground.
Right.
And I thought about buying that and I was like, fuck that. Who's going to do that? Like, that's not the average person. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, if I have to do this again, I'll go spend the $15 on whatever that little janky thing is. But like, it is still the case that VR like has a bunch of bullshit associated with it, despite the fact that I love VR. Like when I Moss, RE7, like I have played, Astro Boy from 2 years ago. Like there are games that are some of my all-time favorite gaming experiences, despite the fact that I consider myself not just a fan, but like an enthusiast, like an advocate for like VR as a medium. Half the time, I can't be asked to set everything up because it's such a fucking pain. And like, that's no different when the Index is a streamlined version of it, right? Like it's got little speakers that are attached to the headset that are like really, really nice, high quality speakers. Like it sounds beautiful, but it's still got wires. They still go all over the place. Like it's still like we're not in 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, where you're getting like high quality visuals and it's just, you know, like you pick up a phone. Like I just want to put the headset on and just click a button on 2 controllers and play. And like this isn't that. And that part is still frustrating, and I suspect will continue to be an obstacle for people to check this out. And I don't know what it'll be like to like watch streamed or like watch a let's play. Like I don't know how enjoyable that'll be. But you know, there's nothing about Alyx is extremely well designed, but there's nothing it can do about the limitations of VR as a technology, and that's going to continue being the case for, you know, some time to come.
I was really curious, just the nuts and bolts of how you played it, because it sounds really long. And it sounds really involved, like really immersive in the sense that you want to play for long sessions. I was wondering, like, what was the average length of a session, and how did you, like, go in? Were you like, goodbye, wife and kid? It's like, I'm going in. Like, don't talk to me for an hour. Or like, if you want to talk to me, then you have to like, how do you play this? Like, how did you play this?
Patrick is such a king in his own home that when he decrees that it is time for daddy to
Family?
go into his escape machine.
In the age of coronavirus, I raised my finger.
Yeah.
No, it was
I'm going to a better world.
I'd actually
My
rather
darling
go
Jessica,
to the.
Papa must earn our bread.
I prefer the fascism of City 17 to the fascism of planet Earth that I live in. No, it was like this is all happening during, you know, sort of the quarantine. I started playing this before all that happened, but then it rolled right into it. And so, you know, I was like, get my daughter to bed between, you know, 8, 9 o'clock, and then watch like an episode of a TV show with my wife. She goes to bed, and then from like 10 to 12 is the witching hour, the gaming hour, Club X gaming hour from 10 to 12. Join me. Twitch.tv/Patrick Klubbeck. No, I'm not doing streams anymore. And yeah, that's about what I would do. 2-hour sessions.
That's long.
But at the end of it, the only reason I was stopping is because I give myself a hard cutoff at midnight to go to bed, because I don't know exactly when my daughter's gonna wake up, and so I would have easily played for longer. I wouldn't have foreseen doubling it, going to 4 hours being a problem. I never got the only thing the only physical impediment was towards the end of it. I was clearly using like muscles in my wrist that I don't use nearly as much. I don't know if that was merely a matter of holding the controllers, which are constantly gripping. So I don't know, like it happened around my thumb. And so I don't know if that was a matter of like muscles aching because I was using them frequently because I was gripping the controllers, and it was just like a natural ache and pain from holding something like that for long periods of time. I can't exactly pinpoint that, but I never found the sessions to be an issue. And I could have easily imagined in a world where my goddamn family just left me alone,
Wow.
that I could have played for 6 hours and like had a problem with it. So that was never an issue. But again, I'm also playing on the high end setup. I wonder if that's different on lower end setups in terms of like the VR. I just don't know, and I'll be curious to see what the like wider reaction is once the game goes live, you know, later today.
The other question that I had is, no company or few companies have as much data as Valve does on what kind of PCs people have, how long they play games, what games they play, all that stuff. They have really good data on that. And I can't imagine them having data that shows now is the time to release a very expensive VR game that requires very expensive equipment in spaces that most people don't have. And it's like, why did they make this? Like, why is this out now? Like, I'm happy that it's here. I want to play it. I want to check it out. But it's like, I don't see why this is happening now.
There was a, I don't know if it was in Gadget. I apologize I just saw it on Twitter and thought the headline like worked. It was something like Half-Life Alyx is like the culmination of Valve's anti-consumer attitude, which is maybe like a little hotter than I would put it, but is not far off the mark, because I think another way of looking at that is just that they do whatever the fuck they want. Right. Often for ill, if we're talking about, you know, like the way they handle like various policies on Steam. But I think Alyx, it feels very much like, hey, we want to make a VR game. And yeah, it's probably going to make some people, a lot of Half-Life fans, mad because they're not going to be able, they're going to ask their friends for spoilers on the lore instead of experiencing it for themselves. But this is what they want to make. And so that's what they're going. It just feels very much like, I don't think there's any data that says now March 2020 is when we needed to, if we just pushed the VR rock up a hill a little bit, it's going to get to the other side and roll down. Maybe they think that that's, they're contributing to that. And I think some of the early data has suggested, it will far and away be the biggest VR game to date, which I don't think is some great shock, especially because my understanding of a lot of, like, some games have sold really well, but like a lot of VR games have sold very poorly. It'll be hard to say, it'll be one of those things in hindsight. Like if we were underplaying the revolutionary aspect of some of Valve's stuff earlier, in the hot take part of this podcast, it may be the case that we truly won't actually know whether this was the moment and it contributed to VR having a moment until after the fact, because I don't think it'll be something you'd be able to know as it happens. It would be something you would be able to tell, in hindsight.
Just so you got it right. It is Engadget. It's Jess Condit over at Engadget.
Yes.
The head is Half-Life Alyx is proof Valve answers to no one. Some of the social was about the anti-consumer stuff. The piece definitely makes that case. I just want to call out the slug, which for people at home, the slug is the thing that comes after. It's the thing at the very end of your URL. It's like if you go to vice.com/Half-Life review, like that Half-Life review is the slug. The slug for this is Half-Life Alyx, Valve, Steam, stockholders, boo. Extremely good.
Is the boo, has that been SEO approved?
I guess it's been SEO approved. God, you ever have access to a CMS and just want to editorialize a little extra? Toss a boo at the end of your slug.
We'll start advocating. I'm going to add that to our next meeting when we talk about social. It's like,
I've seen this being used. I think maybe we should get ahead of the curve and start incorporating boo to all of our negative takes.
That's Half-Life
Cool.
Alyx. I think
it's
very good. Not revolutionary, but I think people are,
Is there a boat section?
No, there is
Thank God.
Other vehicles in general.
The boat section is not that bad. It's pretty good.
The boat section is the place I stopped that game every single of the 5 times I tried to play Half-Life 2.
Cado makes the case.
The buggy section is also not, like, the vehicle stuff does not hold up. My guess is particularly well.
That boat was cool as hell in 2006.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
2004, whatever 100%. It was. I was like, fucking A.
Yeah,
I can walk and be in a boat.
Tunnels.
Oh my God!
No, as I don't recall, no vehicles in Half-Life Alyx, so you're good.
Great.
In other shooter news, are folks still playing through Doom? Do people still have Doom thoughts?
Rob finished it, right? You published a review.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, that sounds weary. That sounds like you lost something in the equation. You left some of yourself in there.
I left. What I lost was the joy of the experience, and I do wonder some of that. Maybe there's a distortion of having sort of compressed my playtime on Doom a little bit. But Emanuel, I'm curious what you made of it, because I know you were playing it as well.
I was listening to the last podcast you did, and you talked about it, and at that point, I was not quite at the last third of the game, and I was listening to you, and it was like, Rob is out of his mind. It's like, this is great. This is so fun. It's working for me on every level. And then I hit the last third of the game, and now I'm on the same page. It's very odd because it's like, I think on paper, it does everything that I wanted it to do, which is more of 2016 Doom. It's just that there's only so much of that you can do. It's so much longer, and it's just the same thing with more tools. And then I think especially in the last 3 hours or so of the game, it just you've seen all the new little gadgets that you can use, all the kill animations, and then it's just okay, now do this for 3 hours, and it's going to get increasingly punishing and increasingly monotonous. And I don't know. It's it kind of fumbles. I still think it's a very good game. It's very fun. It's if you like 2016, you'll definitely enjoy this. But I think they overspent themselves a little bit. Is kind of my takeaway at the end. There's also a few things that are legitimately annoying and like flaws that the original didn't have.
Yeah.
To me, the biggest one is the game is all about momentum. It's like as long as you're moving and you're killing things and you're going from execution to flame belch to the BFG, it feels really good. I think it feels good the whole way. But the one thing that like brings the game to a screeching halt is this one enemy type that they seem
oh my god
really proud of. Like, oh, look at this like really cool different enemy design. It's the Marauder, right? Is the one we're talking about. Yeah, which is just terrible. It's like there seems to be such a big gap between how they think it comes off and how it actually comes off. And yeah, I don't. What do you think about it? What do you think how would you explain the problem with that enemy type?
Okay, so I think the problem they're trying to solve is that the entire like Doom as an experience is actually smaller than it appears, right? Like they keep introducing these different enemy types, and this was kind of what I was driving at in my review. They keep introducing different enemy types, and the dynamics fundamentally don't change. Like, they introduce, okay, these guys spam rockets, and that'll keep you hopping. And it's like, yeah, but there's already enemies that do area of effect weapons, and that keeps moving around. And they keep piling different enemy types into these battle arenas. And fundamentally, once you've really figured out the layout of the arena and you sort of fall into your rhythm of hitting your cooldowns, no matter how many they throw at you, that loop doesn't really change all that much. You're still basically cycling through your progressions, as it were. So they introduced the Marauder, and I think the Marauder is an attempt to solve that. And the Marauder is an attempt to say, okay, well, here's an enemy you can't just run away from and dance around and take shots at him from behind. Like, here's a guy that you're going to have to maneuver around in a completely different way, and is going to force you to control spacing in a way that none of the other enemies in our game force you to do. Like, the Marauder shows up, and suddenly Doom turns into something akin to a fighting game. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that it does disrupt that loop we've been talking about, but not necessarily in a fun way. Like, when the Marauder shows up, if there's still enemies on the map, you can't deal with him right now. You have to clear out the enemies so you have room to maneuver. And in the meantime, he's just like cutting you down, and it's really punishing and stressful. It's yet another enemy that makes you feel kind of weak and fragile in this game. The other part of it is, even once you've cleared out those enemies, the Marauder. So for people who haven't encountered this enemy yet, the Marauder is this fucking Minotaur Viking dude, basically. He's got a big, invulnerable shield that if you just fire from a distance, he'll pop the shield in front of him and absorb all the damage. Nothing happens. If you get too close to him, he will take out a combat shotgun, double-barreled shotgun, and fucking blast you back. And if you try to stand at a distance, he will throw these energy bolts at you. You can dodge around, but they have a pretty wide cone. That's the other thing with this character. Everything about this character has sort of a hitbox or an area effect that's larger than you think it is. And the only way to get him is when he rears up for a charging attack with his sort of double-headed axe, his eyes flash green. And when the character is introduced, the game tutorializes every enemy you see. You get a little video of how you fight them. When the Marauder shows up, you're told, when his eyes flash green, shoot him. Okay. What the game doesn't make readily apparent is that the correct zoning for the Marauder is really finicky. Like, you have to be like it's not stand at medium range. The game tells you you need to fight him at minimum range. No. You need to fight him at 7.5 feet.
It's finicky, like I would say, like a really bad fishing mini game where you're trying to get like sliding bars to like land in the correct area. Only you're doing it like with your entire body because
that
you're trying
terrible.
to like. It is terrible. It's very bad. It's and for a game that like is very clear about how you do anything to a fault, right? It's like you meet a new enemy and the game is like, here is exactly how you kill this enemy every single time. It's like. In this instance, it tells you that, and then you're like, I still don't get it. It's like, I still don't understand. It's like, it's still not working. I'm doing the thing that you're telling me, and it's not working.
They also do, so they do another weird thing, which is when they have you fight him the first time, I think the weapon they use as an example of how you fight him is the double-barreled shotgun. Mm-hmm. That's actually a terrible weapon to use against this guy because the reloading time is too long, so it's like it's tough to make that work. And also the timing window to get max damage out of the double-barreled shotgun is really, really narrow. Like if you hit someone, if you basically push that gun against an enemy character and pull the trigger, it will demolish them. But if you are just a few inches off, it's half as effective. The actual best weapon to fight that character with is the arbalest. Which is sort of like the plasma sniper weapon that you get. And once I realized that the arbalest would just lay that dude out, he became pretty trivial. Once it was one-on-one, he was a pretty easy character to deal with. But he was a huge pain in the ass to deal with because he always showed up at a point where first you had to run around like evading the guy while you cleared out the arena and got set up to deal with him. And then you sort of played this fighting game thing with him. And he was a really exasperating enemy type. And to make sure that there's no way you're not going to hate this guy, I don't think the BFG worked on him.
Nothing does.
I know the super sword they give you does not work on it.
Right. So Doom gives you all, I think this is a really smart thing it does, where as you get further in the game and it gets harder, it gives you more tools that are basically like a ripcord you can pull in case you're like, this is too much, I can't deal with this, like this enemy is too hard. And it gives you like several tools to be like, this enemy specifically, fuck him, I'm going to push this special ability, and it makes him disappear, and then it changes the entire dynamic of a combat.
Or the ripcord, just like, you could just say, it just vanishes them into a portal?
No, there's a weapon, but it's like, there's like 3 different weapons that are like going to instantly kill most enemies in the game. Oh, okay. Almost all enemies in the game. Except for this one. So and it seems like, to me, it comes off as like they're so proud of how clever and interesting the fight against this guy is that they don't want to give you the out. And it's just like, no, please, like the only reason I want this like super special sword to kill enemies with one shot is to get rid of this guy, and I can't do it. And it's so frustrating.
And the thing to remember is this guy will often show up toward the end of one of those long arena battles, and the game's not going to save until you win it. So the thing is, like, this dude is often popping up at the moment where you're like, okay, this was a long fight. I'm ready to be. And then it's like, here he comes. And you're like, oh,
there's a Kool-Aid man just busting through the...
Yeah. And they start... The first couple times he shows up, it's like, okay, this is a rare character type. All right, I better get ready for this. Act 3, it's like every fight features one of these assholes, and it is just it's too much. I feel like those moments of like heated nonstop combat are really, really good, but I think the game really starts to show how limited its bag of tricks, its ideas really are, the longer it goes on. And the other thing I just can't get over, I was talking about this a little bit with Cam Kunzelman after we filed our reviews. We were chatting about our various experiences with the game. And the thing I mentioned to him was it feels so much as I play Doom Eternal. Like there was somebody on 2016 who knew that story was dumb and made that game good in spite of some of the direction that maybe other people wanted to go. And Doom Eternal is giving free reign to everyone who was like, all right, I'm going to tell this awesome wild story. And there's so much narrative in Doom Eternal that I'm kind of floored by it. Like Doom 2016 is like, oh yeah, who cares about the story? The Doomslayer just wants to slay some people. Doom Eternal is like, let's go through this this nested series of tragedies that span the ages. And we have an entire cosmology of how all these events and the various iconographies that have appeared throughout our game, how it all ties together. And it is way too much.
I've been on the wiki while you're talking. I'm trying to find the shield guy, is what I've been trying to find. And I've looked at all the different enemy types basically in the game. And there's a lot of lore here in a way that I didn't necessarily expect. I can't even read anything on this page because it might be a spoiler, but there was like cultures I didn't know the name of that I'm not even going to get into it. There's more here than I thought there was. That's all. And it's sad to say that it doesn't come together necessarily.
One more thing about Doom Eternal that I find disappointing, and this came up in your discussion last week, which was about how like there's only two things in the game essentially. There's these combat arenas, and then you're kind of platforming around. And if you remember, like before every game was borrowing from Half-Life, the way first-person shooters worked, or like they were designed, if you go back to Doom, it's like all you have is like combat encounters, but then like geometry, like just the layout of the levels was pretty interesting. Like if you go back and play Doom, which I do pretty regularly, like I do love those original games, like those Romero levels are just cool. There's like these interesting secrets, and like the way everything connects, it's almost like Dark Souls in the way that it's like layered and circular and all that stuff. And it's like there's none of that in here. It just like I wish there was more of that. I don't necessarily want like a Metroid type thing where I'm like solving puzzles, but there is no geometry really. It's just like I jump to this platform into that platform, and now I'm in an arena, and then I do that again. There's no actual level design even. Or like it's very simple, I should say.
I think there's a lot of illusory complexity to the level design, but usually it's in a manner of it's a bit like the Riddler trophies, honestly, because I just play Batman. It's very much like, okay, how do you get to this question mark?
Yeah.
And like that's somewhat interesting, but you're right. Like I think if you think about old Doom levels, and a lot of shooters from that period were like this, there was the maze structure to a lot of those maps. And a thing that maybe Half-Life didn't do us favors on was Half-Life kind of got away from the maze, right? Like one of the other big changes that Half-Life introduces is it's pretty linear. Like where you go is you're pretty well funneled, and games have continued to sort of move in that direction. But what you don't have is that experience of like old school Doom, where it's like, man, where do I go? Like, how do I get out of this thing? And you get excited when you came to a room full of enemies because that meant it was a new place, right?
It's like time to mash the space bar and hope that a secret door opens.
It was even stuff like, oh, this room is shaped like a giant star, or like I'm walking inside a giant pentagram, or just weird stuff like that.
Yeah. This doesn't really have a lot of that, and where it introduces the sense of like movement being a thing that like traversal being a thing that matters is with jumping puzzles. And let me tell you, I haven't had enough of that by the end as well. There is, by the time you get to the last act of the game, this place called Urdak, they just go full on jumping puzzle all the time. And Doom's movement feels okay, but not tremendous. The Doom Slayer is not a nimble, sprightly fellow. And so being asked to solve like these series of really finicky jumping puzzles, where the solution is obvious, it's just, how do I make this inert fuck cross this chasm without like plummeting his death? That got really tricky in a couple places. One thing I wanted to ask you about, though, where did you come down in the boss battles by the end?
Man, I'm trying to remember. Like, I'm trying to even remember them. Like, there's basically two, right? Because the rest of them become normal enemies. Like, you're introduced to a new enemy type, and then he just becomes he just shows up in these combat encounters. I mean, the last one is not good. It's like it's just there's nothing to it. You're just unloading fucking plasma shots into a giant. I don't want to.
No, but it's like if you've ever seen the I don't even know what the archetype for this boss battle is, but you know how like in a platformer where it's side scrolling, but then the boss enemy takes up the entire back of the screen. And now you're fighting something that's in the backdrop, right?
Sure,
and it's basically that. Like that's how Doom ends, is with this really like old school like boss design where it's like, see this big bag of hit points over there? We need you to just beat the shit out of it like a piñata for ages. But I think in general, like the game probably, I didn't love the boss fights myself, again, because I think they're pretty tricky, but they also just feel so in a lot of cases they just aren't really what I'm looking for from Doom, and so it always felt like a little bit of a mismatch. And I will admit, by the end, by like halfway through the game, I was starting to think about like changing difficulty. By that last act, I was like, I'm done here. Like, it's like goodbye, ultraviolence, goodbye. That's not me anymore. I don't care. I just, you know what? Like, just send the difficulty level all the way to the basement. That's where I live now. Fuck yeah, I want my Sentinel armor. That's how the game politely asks you if like maybe you've bitten off more than you can chew. Like you die a few times on a boss, and the game's like, would you like your Sentinel armor, sir? No judgments. It doesn't affect your progression. We just got this cool Doom guy armor that's like really damage resistant. Seems like it might be a thing you need.
Well, the game also has like the 1-up system, which I don't really. So the way it works is like as you're exploring around, one of the things, secrets you can find are straight up just little, Doom guy icons that you pick up, and then you can survive a death. You'll just spawn back in. But it makes encounters a little weird because it's like cool, like you can like jump in, like barely, die in an encounter, but then you're starting from scratch because, well, you had those 2 lives, but those 2 lives are gone now. They don't just like stack at a checkpoint or something like that. They just disappear. And what I think the game should have done was have a system where those just, if you didn't like, if you should be able to, I don't know, get those back at a checkpoint or something, or give you like choice in the matter, like make some risk reward with the player with those. Just having, because it creates a sense of, it's just weird to like lose those because they don't actually really help you. Maybe they help you survive to the end of a level, but you don't actually learn any lessons about a combat scenario when you get 2 extra lives. You go back in, it's like, how about what you just did means nothing because you need to start from scratch and learn it all over again because those 1-ups were basically helping you cheat.
Yeah, and also it's harder now because now no more 1-ups. So you had your best shot. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing where I've ended up with this game. Like I think the amount of it I like continued to narrow, and in that narrow sliver of the experience, I really, really like it. But to me, that's just not enough. Like I'm just not that. The notion that it's a game that just cuts to the chase, it gets to the awesome ass kicking that we love from Doom. I don't know. I guess this is ultimately what's driving at my review. There's a reason games didn't stay like this, right? Like there's a reason that they began to try to create more elaborate set pieces where you would see certain memorable things or things we fit into sort of a memorable narrative framework, because
it's also just like it's a sequel problem, right? Like I think they stared down the barrel of, all right, you make a sequel to Doom. What is that? And the what you pull from is like, what they saw on the tool on the shelf. They added complexity. Like it's just there were different directions they could, but like sequels inherently in video games are seen that they have to become more complex in some direction or another, and it feels like maybe the direction they chose is I don't know. It's the inherent problem of like video game sequels. Like they could have just done more of what they did, but you have to do that with either more bombast or more complexity, and I don't know. It just seems like that's kind of a lot of the issue they faced was just what even is a sequel to Doom 2016, and I don't know. The one that they ended up with is maybe not the one we're all happiest with.
So it goes. There is a sequel that came out that I think Cado and I at least are very happy with. I can't speak for you, Cado. Okay,
no,
I can
absolutely,
speak for you,
it's fucking great. I love it.
Cado's having a good time with Animal Crossing: New Horizons. Tell me about your time with it so far. We're gonna do a quick check-in today. We'll be back on Friday with as stuff continues to unlock and as we get Gita back on the pod to do a deeper dive on Friday. But for now, real quick, what is your early takeaway?
I love it. Also, I feel probably the most amount of FOMO I've ever had with any of these games. Because
but you're playing it. What?
I know, but everyone's a day ahead of me and getting the cool shit, and I'm seeing it on the internet instead because I didn't do the thing where I spent my first night. I didn't realize that the reset. So Animal Crossing has days, and it works with your Switch clock. So the day-night cycle is based on real time. So when it dropped midnight Thursday evening into Friday morning, you technically had 5 hours there to get all of your quote-unquote day one stuff done because the reset in Animal Crossing is 5 a.m. I thought it was midnight. So I thought, well, I should just get to bed and get up early in the morning and do my day one stuff. It turns out, actually, I'm a day behind everyone else on the internet. And I'm like, I want all that cool shit. When do I get all that cool shit? It's like, you got to wait 24 hours, buddy.
I'm sorry. Listen, I actually do think that has caused some... not just FOMO, but frustration because I think a lot of people expect you can do more in day one than you can do.
Right.
The amount of stuff you can do in day one in this game really does feel like it's been perfectly tuned for a midnight release and someone who wants to stay up for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to knock out, basically earning your early miles to pay off your tent. We have oh, wow. Look who we have here.
Hello.
Hi. We have a second Klepik on the phone.
Do you want to say hi?
Say hi.
You're not going to say hi?
No.
You want water?
Is that a giraffe?
Do you want to steal my water?
That's a tiger. Listen, this is why I would not survive well in the wild. Is that a giraffe? And then a tiger mauls me.
Is that a butterfly meme?
It's a giraffe.
Yeah, it is a giraffe. Yes, I was right. Good. Safe.
I want a tiny little cup with water in it.
You want a tiny little cup with water in it?
This is
okay.
incredibly
All right. We're gonna go. All right, Jessica, tell everyone I'm gonna leave the podcast. Say I'm leaving.
You're leaving.
All right, you can talk about GameStop's crummy labor practices without me.
They're bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Say bye.
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 We will briefly talk about the GameStop stuff once we finish our Animal Crossing check-in. But yeah, so I managed to do all of the stuff I could do in day one in those first 90 minutes to 2 hours at midnight, which is just basically... I mean, I guess it's been a few days now. It's pretty clear that in the early game, there are a couple of clear gates for progress. Yeah. For people who've never played this thing before, Rob or Emanuel, neither of you have been Animal Crossing people before, I'm guessing. All right, so I think you get over the course of time, you end up getting an image of what Animal Crossing is from memes and screenshots. And it's like, oh, look, people have decorated their homes and people have made funny memes by importing outside images and people have cute pictures with their friends. And all that stuff is kind of there from the jump. But a lot of the interaction is limited based on what facilities are available to you. And so to begin with, it's you, two other villager NPCs, and then the dude Tom Nook, who everyone hates, who I hate more than ever with this game because of a request he's made, and his sons, or his nephews, not his sons, his nephews, which who run the shop. And that is it. And you have to earn miles, which is basically achievement points, to pay off your tent and upgrade it into a real house. And then from there, you end up also, donating, insects and fish that you've captured to Nook so that he can send them to his museum buddy, who will eventually come to want to build a museum if you keep donating stuff. And there are these gates that will slowly unlock more and more of what you think of as the Animal Crossing experience. And those have not just hard requirements like, hey, go get me 30 pieces of iron so that we can build this bridge or whatever. The iron isn't for the bridge, right? The iron is for... What's the iron for? What's that big...
It's for the construction of the shop, isn't it?
It's the shop. Yeah, you're
30
right. It's the
of
shop.
each wood and 30 iron.
And 30 iron. Yeah. It also has this time gate, and so that meant that like I definitely saw people, you friend of the site Casey Malone, thinking that they were fucking up because they were not caught up with like where I was at, or where other people who had become like very obsessive about being like clearing the board on what their daily objectives were, basically. Because it seemed like they woke up and started the same time that we did. What the fuck were they missing? And I think that was pretty bad. And on top of that, I actually think it does not do a good job of signposting some of those early requirements.
And to be clear, it's not just that certain things only happen once the day resets. It's that even when you hit a milestone, you've collected all the items. It's like it's gonna take a day for that thing to be built. So if you miss that thing, it's not like it still happens that same day. It's like, no, you've got to wait until the next reset, even if you're doing it early in the morning the next day.
Right. Even if you had somehow gotten the miles for your tent by 7 a.m., you would still have to wait until 5 a.m. the next day for that tent to turn into a house.
Yeah.
And that sucks. And also, like, there are straight up things that I think it's very easy to miss or misunderstand.
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot of people not know that you have to donate creatures to Tom Nook to get Blathers and the museum stuff rolling.
Yeah.
I totally misunderstood the the eating fruit powering you up situation.
Oh my god.
I destroyed. So this is the actual thing that happened to me. So I posted some very cute pictures of my house and my yard in Animal Crossing on Twitter yesterday. I'm very happy with them. Thank you for the compliments, people who sent them. But the only reason I got there is because I actually fucked up and it sent me into gamer mode. Early on in this game, they tell you if you eat fruit, you get superpowers. For each fruit you eat, you could break a rock with a shovel to reveal the juicy ore inside of it. You could lift a tree out of the ground whole, put it in your pocket, and then go replant it somewhere else. And so I go like, oh, hell yeah, I got a lot of fruit. I'm going to eat this fruit, break these rocks, and start getting this iron ore. Except one, a lot of those rocks only had clay or stone in it instead of iron. And two, a thing I had forgotten because I haven't played an Animal Crossing game in 7 years or whatever, is all of the rocks will drop something 8 times without you breaking them. If you break it, you get one thing. And so the idea is you could get the 8 things, and then if you really wanted to dig deep, break the rock for a 9th thing. But that removes it from your island for like a number of days. And that means
you only get 1 rock back a day.
Right.
So if you have 4 rocks on your island and you break them all, it's going to be half a week before you have
And when you need 30 iron and there are 3 things that can drop per rock and the iron is the rarest thing, you destroy that faucet. I was like, well, I'm fucked. I can't come back from this. I can't get 30 iron. I'll have to wait a day for a rock to come back. And then if I'm lucky, I'll get 2 iron out of it. So I invested heavily in strip mining.
Yep.
One of the things that you can spend your achievement bucks on, your Nook miles, are these overseas expeditions to random proc-gen islands where I would go, and I've gotten very efficient at taking every last resource from that island, just demolishing it. Let me tell you, when I talk about breaking rocks, I break every rock. I remove every tulip.
Yep.
I cut down every tree to the degree that I can cut it down. What else?
Funny
every
is that I was
everything.
leaving those trees up for a bit, and then I realized I was wasting a bunch of time hitting the same trees over. So then I started cutting them down in order to
and different bugs appear. Different bugs appear on the stumps.
Yeah, for sure.
So you want rare bugs, you want to get some stump action going. So you got to cut them down. I have like a specific like kit to bring with me when I go to become a terrible disaster miner.
Just the right tools that you need, nothing else, because you want all that other slots to fucking grab all the shit that you're taking.
It is so on its face in some ways, like so clear that what I am doing is like, I want my house to look cute, so I am willing to destroy the world. I am willing to go to these islands. I don't care if there's an ecosystem there. I don't care if someone else is like, there are people on these islands because other people are hanging out on these islands.
Yeah.
Just like, this is where you get your other villagers from. You go to an island and someone is like having a cool camp day. All they're doing is like, maybe they're fishing. Maybe they're hanging out by a fire. What you're doing is rolling through with the axe and the shovel and just destroying everything around them. And then at the end, you'll have the nerve to go up to this motherfucker and be like, hey, Bianca, you're cool. You're like a white leopard pop star. That's sick. And she's like, wow, I love nature. And I'm like, you know where has a lot of nature still? Not this place, my island. You should come through. And she's like, that sounds great. Because she isn't programmed to recognize that I've spent the last 15 minutes getting every last piece of rubble from this island and putting it in my backpack so I can flip it for bells and get a slight upgrade on my house.
I don't know, maybe she just has an enlightenment perspective on the entire matter. And she's like, look at this strange visitor who's conducting improvements upon this wild land.
I've recognized potential. Yes,
I must accompany this steward of the land back to his home island.
It's incredible, and it is again. It's so like bald-faced in its meaning that it's hard for it to even sustain the colonial criticism, which is to say only because it's doing it. It's there.
Yeah.
It's the text. It's not subtext. This is a game about like chopping the world down so you can get a better bed. And not even a better bed, because the beds don't matter. A cuter bed.
Yeah.
A bed that you think for 2 days you will like better, until in a day after that you see something new in the catalog and you're going to import that instead. Like it is unbelievable. Anyway, I think my house is real cute. You can find pictures on my Twitter.
Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun taking photos in this game. Like a lot. They're fun.
The multiplayer is fun. I think it really behooves you to get like a clique. Like there aren't guilds in Animal Crossing, but you're deeply benefited from basically having a guild, because everyone's shops get different stuff. So it's easier to like go around and find cool stuff from each other's shops. Everyone's fruit sells more on other islands than their native island. So if you're in an apple island and your friend has a peach island, the best thing you could do is take all of your apples, go sell them at your friend's place, and they can bring all of their peaches and come sell them at your place and get a profit on that.
Rude about the shop. For the
What's
first
that?
2 days, they let you shop whenever the fuck you want.
I hate
whenever
this.
you
Yeah.
want. Midnight, 1 a.m., doesn't fucking matter. Timmy and Tommy are there in the tent with Nook, just fucking hanging out, and you can sell and buy whenever the fuck you want. And then they build their store, and all of a sudden, these motherfuckers have a 10 p.m. curfew. What the fuck? Why can't
They're
I buy
sleeping.
shit?
You know what? I was
what?
mad at first.
I'm mad.
At first.
I'm only mad because they set up this expectation that I could always access this fucking resource, and then they take it away after 2 days.
They were in crunch, and then they got out of crunch. They
should have
shipped
just
the game.
They should have just started
which
like,
is-
oh no, Timmy and Tommy went to sleep. That's why they're not here in the tent anymore, or something. To set up
well,
this
you need those bells early on. They know you're staying up late.
Yeah.
They know you're playing until
Yeah.
3 a.m. They don't want to close. Well, the thing is, they close at 10, but you can still sell.
You can still
shit
sell,
to
but
them.
you can't buy anything either if you happen
and you
to
sell
need
at
something from them.
You also sell at 80%, only at 80% instead of 100% of what. There's a shipping and handling fee, motherfucker. I put it in a bin outside your door.
God.
This is easier. Anyway, I'm enjoying it quite a bit. It's really charming. I think playing with a friend really helps. It's stock market time.
Fuck, I
turnip
missed the
season.
stock market.
Did you miss the stocks? Sorry, stalks. Did you miss the turnips?
I missed the stonks.
You missed the stonks. You can buy turnips. Turnips appreciate or depreciate in value over the course of the week. Different markets have different rates for them. Again, a good reason to have friends, because you can go to their market where they're buying turnips for more. I'm sitting on 56,000 bells worth of turnips right now. I gotta turn a profit.
Holy shit.
My boys are not buying them my boys are buying them at a 30 bell deficit right now, or decrease. So I have got to find somewhere to offload these turnips. It's a nightmare. I don't think there's any other the last thing that having friends does, there's the online thing, Cado, the ATM that has like special things that you can order.
The like catalog that ships out something to you the next day.
Yeah, except if you send it as a gift, it shows up instantly.
Excuse me?
Yeah, so if you sent me whatever your like KK Slider song of the day is, I would get it immediately.
What?
Yeah.
Fuck.
Mm-hmm. Communism wins is the thing. We're here to share. We're here to help each other.
Yeah.
You want to give to others, and
Right.
it turns out that's the way to you get benefits for that.
God.
So yeah, we'll check in again, but please know that this is the arc I've gone on so far.
Can I ask one thing as an
Always.
observer of
Yes.
Animal Crossing? Did the moment that Stardew Valley have in between Animal Crossings change anything about the equation for you? Or is it like not that relevant?
It's not that relevant for me. because I had already been playing. I'd already played some like Harvest Moon games, some Rune Factory games. I didn't fall deep in the Stardew Valley hole. I mean, I say that I probably put a few dozen hours into it, but when I compare that to my friends who have all put 100 hours into it or whatever, that's you know what I mean? There's a difference there, right? Yeah, I put 27 hours into Stardew Valley, but that's nothing compared to what Stardew Valley demands. Rob probably has 200 hours in Stardew Valley or something. So that didn't change it for me, but I do suspect it's made some of the crafting stuff more people more amenable to it. Though I guess things didn't break in Stardew Valley, right? You didn't like have like an axe that would break. You didn't have to replace.
Oh my god, that's the other thing. I thought once you hit the last level of axe, it would just be good.
Oh no,
Fucking
everything breaks, Cado.
Everything breaks.
I bet you're gonna get tools by the end that don't. I don't mind it that much.
Yeah, it's like fine. It's just like wasn't expecting it in the middle of a fucking island run, and I was like, well, shit.
Well, you can talk to the dude and get replacements.
All right, for miles. I need those miles for more tickets.
You don't need those miles.
I need those miles for more tickets to go to more islands so that I can strip mine them.
Spend the 100 miles on the axe. Also, just build a new axe.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing. But it's just like, I got these resources here. I want to take them back, not use them.
I get you.
I just wasn't.
You want 100% profit. You want no cost
not
on this
at all.
trip. Yeah, got it. Yeah, it's. I've had a good time with it, despite my I'm joking about it, but I do think that there is something genuinely fucked up about the ways in which it smooths over.
It almost feels like it's towing satire, but not. I don't know. Like, there's like so much more. I feel like that Tom Nook says that you can screen cap, and you're like, what the fuck is this?
No, like it's not. It's jokes. It's not satire. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
Like you can. A comedian,
but every time somebody describes this, I come around to the point. Like when I had this experience reading Gita's review as well.
Yeah.
Where I was like, this is so out there that it has to be commentary. The game is
right.
Like, the text of the game is so clearly
because all of this falls away by week 2, right? This is the necessary cost by which you get to have your Twee adventure. You know, like at the beginning, it's very clear because the costs are high and you need to go do this stuff. You need to, but like once you get through this first once I'm at the point I am now, 4 days in, like that stuff becomes secondary to the fun time, and so the message ends up being like, you know what? You got to pay your due. You got to get out there.
This omelet is delicious.
This omelet is delicious. I think that some of those jokes do land, and I think I hate Tom Nook more than ever. I'm just going to spoil an early-ish game thing.
Oh,
it's like day 2 or 3, and it's a request that comes in, basically. There's a moment in, I guess I don't know if it's necessarily day 3. I guess that's the thing, right? It was day 3 for me.
That's day 4. Yeah.
Tom Nook he gets on the microphone every morning. He does his morning announcements. In the middle of his morning announcements, it's like a camp counselor type vibe. He's like, gather together, everyone. Here's the announcements. Today is Pancake Day or whatever. It hasn't been Pancake Day yet. If it was Pancake Day, I'd be happier about Tom Nook. He's like, hey, everybody, got some announcements to make. And then his phone starts ringing. Motherfucker, silence your cell phone. 2, he picks up the phone.
Yeah.
He picks up the phone.
Starts having a fucking conversation.
Has a conversation. He makes a sale on the phone to someone else about the package that you bought from him. He's like, oh, yeah, we could set you up.
Always
yeah, exactly. That's what ABC, always be selling. CELLIN. And he makes a sale while on the phone with you. And then you go talk to him in his fucking tent, and he goes, yeah, man, I just moved 3 more houses. Did I say houses? Yeah, that's right. These new people said they didn't want tents. They wanted houses. And they wanted furnished houses.
Furnished. These motherfuckers get furniture when they move in.
So, not only do they get furniture, Cado.
Yeah, we have to make it.
This motherfucker goes, so I could use a little help, actually. Could you go make them the furniture for the resort package I just sold them? Get the fuck out of here, my guy. So yes, if there is some degree of built-in satire that has like been ratcheted up to 11, it's the Tom Nook stuff. It's the like, this dude is constantly getting one over on you, like employing you to do his labor, etc. But I don't think that like washes its hands of the fact that the way to progress, the only way to progress, is in I guess you know what?
It's maybe not the only way to progress. That's why I was thinking satire because you could just wait. You can wait till your next day.
Just wait. You could just wait. You could just be 2 weeks behind everybody. Yeah, you can demolish the earth.
Yeah,
it's a test.
Yeah, and we failed.
We failed. You're right. You're right. I thought about it. I don't know if you remember this last episode. I said like, could you get through by da-da-da-da-da? Could you just not go do these miles and go to these ProcGen islands? No, didn't last. I was on 4 of those shits by the first day.
I had a ticket before the airport opened up.
Yeah, I was like, I'm ready to go. Knock, knock, knock. Let me in. So that's our Animal Crossing update. We'll probably be back at the end of the week with another one.
Yeah.
We gotta talk about who our villagers are and stuff. So we'll do that
market.
all. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Anyone else playing any games, or can we drag GameStop briefly?
GameStop has been bad.
GameStop's been bad. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that a lot of people who work, not a lot of people, all the people who work in retail and food service and cashiers, they're in a really difficult spot right now. You basically are either out of work or you're going into a very tense and potentially dangerous situation of work. At GameStop, it's just a very bad example of what's happening at other places, like a very bad, negligent, greedy, immoral example of what's happening at other places. And that is essentially like ignoring a lot of common sense advice about how things should be cleaned and what kind of foot traffic you have in the store, and just ignoring those blatantly because they just want to keep the stores open and have some kind of trickle of income while all of this is happening. I think the example that really blew my mind from Patrick's story is that, as you know, when you go to GameStop, there are these demo stations where you can play games, and some of them are just out there because GameStop chose to put them out there, and some of them are actually paid advertising, right? So if I'm just using this as a random example, I have no idea if they ever paid for this, but if Sony wants to advertise God of War when it comes out, they have a demo station and they pay GameStop to make sure that the station stays out there. So people walk in, they try it, maybe they like it, they buy it. And what a lot of store managers and employees at GameStop did very wisely is put those things the fuck away. Because what is more likely to be like a point of transmission of COVID-19 than like a sweaty, gamery, communal PlayStation controller, right? So
yes,
just like,
totally.
Just put that shit away. You know what I mean? Come in, buy a game, leave. Like that seems like a safer way to do it. And GameStop management sent an email out like saying, okay, our stations you can put away, but the stations that people paid for, those stay out there because they paid for them and we need to keep them out there. That is just one example of something they did. Another really ridiculous one that we did in a follow-up story is that GameStop was basically instructing employees to argue with authorities if they came by and said like, hey, you need to shut the store down, that it's not essential. They like basically gave them a piece of paper to print out and hand to like a cop and say like, actually, no, this is an essential store. And if you have a problem here, call this corporate number and take the beef to them, which is another just like wild choice to make in a time like this. And I think what you're seeing, and this is me speculating, but it's like, I think for a while now, GameStop is just a question of like, what's the least painful way for them to like, shut down, basically? Like, how much money can you extract from this operation as it like spirals out of business? And I think this is just a part of that. It's like, it might be dangerous, but we can get X more dollars out of these stores while this is happening if we keep them open. which is terrible. Terrible.
A thing I kept thinking about as I read this is, did any of you either ever read John Boyce's like farewell to Radio Shack?
Yes, I forgot about that.
So John Boyce, very, very funny writer, generally focusing on sports, but wrote this thing when Radio Shack went under about what the experience of working for Radio Shack was during its long decline. Because I think Radio Shack is a similar sort of business, right? What kills Radio Shack is the fact that a lot of like electronics moved to a sort of disposable model, and the really high-end ones are basically sealed up end to end, and there's nothing for a Radio Shack to do there. And then a lot of like the do-it-yourself, gadget fiddling and self-repair stuff also goes by the boards, and Radio Shack is kind of left with not much of a business model. They try to reinvent themselves multiple times. But what Boyce portrays in that piece is how the cluelessness at the top and the recognition that basically the company was in Zugzwang in some ways, right? Like they couldn't pivot to a new strategy because that was uncertain and probably money losing. But where they were at the moment was also a losing position, and where that all ended up sort of putting the most pressure was down the chain on employees who were forced to react to increasingly bizarre dictates from corporate as the company sort of flailed for a strategy. And the thing that really like differed in these two cases for me is just the stakes involved, right? But in terms of what is actually happening, it's very similar. The difference is right now there's a pandemic, but it did sort of have the same vibe of like GameStop seems to be in a position where for whatever reason they feel they cannot shut down. Which I think might be the clearest indication of how bad things are, because I gotta believe if they still had healthy cash reserves, they could, you know what I mean? Like this is a story you want to avoid, right? This is a story you do not want getting out about. We gave our employees, many of whom are young, a printout from an email they're supposed to show to cops when they showed up to shut them down, and the fact they couldn't get ahead of that problem, that they couldn't say, you know what, we need to close these stores while we figure out how we're going to handle COVID-19, is probably the most revealing thing about how high the water has gotten for GameStop.
Just generally already, yeah. I think about that Radio Shack essay is that it was framed around the announcement that Radio Shacks would be open on Thanksgiving Day, which is an interesting. Which 5 years ago, when this piece was published, that was novel. Still, the idea that a retail shop would cross that line, right, and say, "Hey, this is one of the few things that American capitalism won't cross is retail shops open on Thanksgiving Day. We've crossed that line," and in a way that actually is still kind of. It still kind of functions as a parallel to this moment, because what you're doing is seeing a company like GameStop, which should not be crossing that line, being willing to cross that line, so desperate they are, and also so poorly managed. I actually can't, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe that you could show me the numbers that prove this. I can't imagine that in many places, specifically places where they're not getting like super special tax subsidies and energy subsidies and stuff, that they were making more per outlet than they were losing in energy bills, payroll, rent, etc. Per day. I mean, they're paying rent no matter what at this point, at least. But I can't imagine they're actually like holding back the bleeding that much. I suspect I read this so much, especially their aggressive response to negative reporting, as like willful ignorance and incompetence, and just like, no, we have to keep going. The sort of thing of like panicked running, where you're like, okay, I should slow down and take stock of where I am, but I'm scared, so I'm just going to keep moving. And that doesn't really reflect well on them either. In the end, they have now shut down, right? Like after some governors stepped in. I know that in California, they were directly ordered to stop. I believe I read, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but in Pennsylvania, threatened to take away their business license. Which
but what was the thing in Toronto?
I don't know.
Like on Friday, right? Where like EB Games, which is owned by GameStop, right?
EB Games, yes, that's the same
Maybe
company.
it's a different deal in Canada. I don't know.
What was the Toronto thing? I missed this.
Oh, just like it was Animal Crossing Day. It was like lines down the block.
God.
Yeah, like that was the thing. Like this got
absolute
like national attention in Canada about like, you know, they're in the same boat as everyone else. Like COVID is everywhere. It's a health emergency, and there was EB Games with packed release lines.
They are absolutely owned by GameStop still in Canada. I know that stuff gets weird sometimes where it doesn't line up the way you might think it would, but in this case, it's 100% right. Yeah, no, like bad. Maybe that's what the play was here. Was they were just trying to make it to Animal Crossing, get that big boost, which is trash, which is like cruel. And I think we've seen a lot of that over the last couple of weeks. Any other GameStop drags do we want to make here? I guess actually broadly related here. This is not related to COVID at all, but related to recent news stuff that we haven't hit in relation to the idea of PS4 kiosks. Did anyone here watch the PS5 presentation? Mark Cerny's ASMR hour?
Oh, boy.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What happened there? I mean, what happened there was it was a GDC talk, right?
Super technical. Obviously not what everyone who just saw that there was going to be some sort of thing on the internet thought it was going to be.
It was a weird situation because I think a lot of people expected like something. Okay, I'll say what I expected, and I think of myself as an informed consumer just based on their messaging. I expected a kind of high-end Keeley-esque behind-the-scenes package, very polished interviews with Mark Cerny, maybe Mark Cerny as our guide through the back halls of power in Sony and PlayStation, talking to the people who made important decisions and giving us kind of consumer examples of what their tech is. And instead we got 45 minutes of Mark Cerny going very deep onto what makes the PlayStation 5 the PlayStation 5.
Ear canal shapes.
Also telling me he wants me to send him my pictures of my ears. And I don't know him like that. We had one interview, Mark. I'm not ready to send you ear pics. I send ears. Fuck off. God. The takeaway for me is so weird about what the pitch is, right? Because Microsoft also did like not in a big event, but they kind of put out another piece with Wired, I think, this like last week, and then did some like not streamer but like YouTuber like
Digital Anvil had their hands.
Oh, did they have them? Okay, yeah, and they did like a whole. I saw people doing entire kind of like breakdowns on what was inside and how State of Decay loaded quicker or whatever, which that's good because that game takes forever to load on console. But I left that whole week feeling kind of weird about the whole next generation because I don't know that there's much for me to get excited by. Is anyone excited about this next set of consoles? Rob is like has a churlish smirk and is shaking his head.
No, I mean this is like the fact that we live in a post Moore's Law world.
Yep.
We have already seen like the last real leap forward, I think, where like you looked at games before this moment and games after this moment, it was like night and day, was probably the move to high def, right? Like that was probably the clearest example of like what was before is clearly all technology. Now we live in this new reality. And then things begin getting more marginal. And there's still a lot, you know, resolution isn't the be all and end all. But certainly I think by the time we get to 4K gaming, at this point, it starts to get really hard to just tell what am I actually getting here versus what am I paying to access that, right?
And,
like, I mean,
presumably paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars in probably $500-600, a complete ballpark guess, in a year when everyone is going to be a little fucking strapped for cash, more so than normal, and most people are already strapped for cash. I don't know.
They're going to be stuck at home.
True.
Well, except, you know, until, as appears increasingly likely, apparently we all got to go back to work.
In 2 weeks.
Somebody who's good at the economy.
Fuck. So yeah, we'll see.
Candles are our elders.
The big sell that Sony was making, the long and short, like for people who are only like vaguely curious, the very reductive breakdown is that the raw numbers on Xbox look bigger, but the big promise that Sony is making is that those numbers don't matter as much as what you do with them, and some clever design decisions have made it so that presumably first party games primarily will be able to like do near instantaneous asset streaming in a way.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
But there's
the
rub. But there's the rub.
I know. Yeah.
Like, so, and people can write in and correct me on this, whatever, but the impression I get from something like this is Cerny's pitch is as you get close to the metal with programming for the next generation PlayStation, there's a lot of performance gains to be realized there. That it is a machine that can punch way above its weight. But you can do that because you're programming for a specific machine with like a specific configuration of the hardware. You can basically, assign each, you assign each bit of memory, basically, where you want it to go and optimize that way. And that's been true for a while. The reason that multi-platform games are less efficient is because they operate at a higher level. They don't know what the metal actually looks like. So there have to be intermediary programs to like figure out where am I going to pull these resources from? And that has a hardware overhead on it to begin with. But the trade-off is a game made that way will work fucking anywhere. It'll work on an Xbox. It'll work on a Windows machine. Right. Many Windows machines across a variety of hardware setups.
Control might have run like shit on a regular Xbox One, but it fucking ran, and it ran there, and it ran everywhere else.
Yeah, and so this notion that if you truly unleash the power of the PlayStation, I start flashing back to PlayStation 3.
Yeah, me too.
Where it's like, man, the people who really know how to program for it, it's like the only people who know how to do that or care to take the time are being paid by Sony.
Right.
And that's just not the lineup of releases that I think is going to carry the day anymore.
Okay, but the Order 1887.
Hold on. Order 1887, I'm back in all the way.
All the way in, baby.
Oh man, you guys have no idea. Like Cerny's a genius. They got so close to the metal with this game. Oh my god, it's like the Xbox's last generation's machine.
We just pitch shift this thing you just said to make it put it in a major key instead of a minor key. Yeah, and it's great.
So many games could run on anything, but this could only run on the PlayStation.
Fuck.
I don't know.
To your point, it's just like we're talking about the PlayStation 5 and like we're in the weeds about low-level APIs.
Yeah,
it's just like it's not going like the console cycle and the excitement that comes with it is never going to be the same again. And we should just we need to let it go. Like we need to I very much grew up with that and I love it. But it's like the attempt to revive here's the next generation. It's like, we're done with that. It's like, it's over.
This is a new phone.
So where does joy come from then, Emmanuel?
Going outside, hugging.
Out.
Done.
Turns out, not anymore.
Are we hugging in VR? That's the new hugging. That's it.
There we go. Touch at a
4K
distance.
hugging. That is it. Press X to hug. Hugs in the chat.
But I think that does point to, so if that goes away, we've never seen this industry thrive without progress, right? Like this is an industry that thrives on the notion that tomorrow's technology is going to be better than today's, that the thing you're playing tomorrow is going to be way more awesome than what you've encountered in the past. And yeah, maybe already instinctively we sense that's just not true. Sports fans certainly do not have it better than they've ever had it before. But I do wonder, what does it look like when games is no longer running on the hype of next year in the promised land?
Here's an idea.
Yeah.
So for progress that is happening and that I would like to see is for obvious reasons, people that normally don't play video games are getting into video games right now, and a lot of people hit me up and like, hey, what should I play? And my answer has been most often it's like, hey, just download this Call of Duty Warzone thing. And that is because most people that ask me have some experience with Call of Duty. The other reason is that it's free. And then the third reason is that it's platform agnostic. So it's like no matter who's asking me, the more people who are downloading it, like the bigger the group of people who are playing it can be. And that has been great. And it's I think it's like actual progress to have like Jason or Derek, like one is on PlayStation 4, one is on Xbox, I'm on PC, and I'm just like download it and then we're all playing together. I find that to be like really fucking great and like new. Like that is so advanced of where we were just like a couple of years ago. And that's progress in my opinion. Where I would like to see progress, and I wonder if like this is the next phase of like the console, like the companies introducing them, is usability. Because right now, for a person who's buying an Xbox or taking an Xbox out of the closet and connecting it to the TV again because they're stuck inside, it is no joke to go from like unplugged Xbox that's been in the closet for a couple of years to playing Call of Duty. It's maybe like 5 hours. It is so complicated and so hard, and there's accounts on top of accounts and passwords and usernames, and
firmware is, I think, one of the biggest things now is like, no, if you want to play a game online, if you want to play a game, get ready to sit for an hour as your shit downloads. Also, good luck with the internet right now because everyone's at home on the internet right now.
It's a nightmare. It is legitimately very, very bad. It's worse than it's ever been, which is weird because we're supposedly supposed to make progress. And I would love it. It's like the way I can see it going forward, especially as these boxes become increasingly lacking compared to a PC. They always have been in a way, but it just, for many reasons, PCs are like more attractive now. If it's just like a box with a button on it, you know what I mean, that just says like go, then I would love that. That to me would be like a huge thing. That would
go button.
Yeah.
Press the go button.
Press the Call of Duty button. Yeah.
What if Mark Cerny had gotten up and had said, "Hey everybody, today we're going to debut a new feature for the PlayStation 5. It's called the go button. And here's Emanuel Maiberg to explain how it works." I would have just like lost
the
my
little
shit.
animated figures in the foreground begin
Oh
to
my
tremble
God.
with excitement.
Were
and,
they
like,
real?
Faux whisper at each other.
Do we think that those are real people?
I can't.
No,
Those are silhouettes. Those are
Those are
dude,
fake
that
MC3
entire
cans.
thing looked like an FMB game from the 90s. Like that
was a Command and Conquer cinematic.
That was Roberta Williams' PlayStation 5 reveal.
Oh God! All right, I feel like we've done enough dunking on that event. We probably dunked on that longer than we dunked on GameStop, who truly fucking sucks. We should probably wrap this one up. Emanuel, thank you so much for coming on. Always appreciate having your insight. The Quake 2 defender finally has logged on.
Oh my God!
Yeah, join my my debate with Rob.
That happened.
It did. That was this episode, Rob. All time good take. All time. Cado, thank you for joining us. Obviously, Rob, thank you for joining us. You can follow everything we do. I'm not going to go through Twitter. Actually, I am because Emanuel's here. Emanuel, where can people find you on Twitter?
Oh God, I forgot the URL. Wait a minute.
What?
He has a URL.
Ass.bargains. ASS.bargains.
Ass.bargains.
Ass.bargains. You forgot the URL. Great.
How do you? I
Rob,
don't know.
where can people find you?
At Rob Zachney.
Cado.
At @A_Cado_appears.
And you can follow me at Austin_Walker. You can follow all of us, twitter.com/Waypoint, twitter.com/Motherboard, for all of the great work Emanuel and Motherboard do. Thank you to Bowen for letting us use the track Miss You of the EP.
The egg in Emmanuel's icon is cracked.
Uh-oh.
Didn't even realize that.
Uh-oh.
What?
Uh-oh.
What's gonna come out?
I got a new monitor.
New manager.
No, there's a crack. No, it's part of a long-running ARG for my account.
How long has
Shit.
the crack been there? How long has this crack been here?
I can't say.
What's going to come out?
I don't remember. So wait, we've all seen his icon.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Was there a crack there before?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I can't tell.
Wait. Does
How-
the Wayback Machine capture?
Yeah, it does.
Twitter
It does because I was
Fucking figure it
recently
out.
on there looking for stuff.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I was. Don't worry about it. You go looking, Rob. This is your. I don't have the authority to give you tasks anymore, but as your friend, I would appreciate a deep dive here. Shout out to Bowen for letting us use the track "Miss You" off the EP Pal Machine. Find out more about that. Waypoint.zone/BOEN. I think that really and truly is it. I hope everyone has a safe week. This is going to be the tough one, everybody. I went to bed last night, be like, all right, I'll see everyone in the office tomorrow. Nope, I will not. This is the week.
Yeah.
I need everyone to persevere. I need everyone to gather your strength and your endurance. This is the hard week. We're going to get over this hump. And then next week, it's going to be easier. And the week after that, it's going to be way harder again. We're going to get through it.
At least there's Animal Crossing.
At least there's Animal Crossing. Fuck capitalism, especially Tom Nook's particular variety.
God.
Go home. Peace. All right. Good
That
pod.
motherfucker said he's building a utopia, but also profits, of course.
But also profits.
I will say though, I love that the Airbnb market crashed.
Oh, I
and
love
so
it.
Rents are actually falling.
I love it. It's so good. It's so clutch. Fuck Airbnb. Did you see some of the I don't know if that video was legit. That video seems
fake.
But the thread was good because the thread brought to light real comments from real landlords who were Airbnb-ing, who were pieces of shit. Like it reflects a reality, unfortunately. And also just landlords in general right now who are like, you saw the post that was the like, where's my wife's income going to come from? She normally takes all the money from the renters. And I was like, what? There was the landlord who was like, there are still places open. They could go work at Whole Foods to get money right now. It's like, yeah, motherfucker, so could you.
I do have sympathy for people who have owned like their own. They bought a second home at one point and they rent out their old one. Like, I have sympathy for that, but at the same time, here's the difference. You can liquidate that asset. Like, if you're really that hard up, here's the difference between you and the people who are renting. You have an asset that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can liquidate.
Did you all see, and this is the last thing I'll say, the egg monopoly thread back in February?
What?
Excuse me?
So fucking funny. It was a woman who attempted to put together a thread about how terrible it was. I think it's off. I think she may have deleted this. The one tweet that really went around, but it was worth reading the whole thread if you can find it, is my great-grandfather had the monopoly of eggs in all of China, and my grandmother was super rich, living in a mansion when the Cultural Revolution happened and communism took everything away. And it was this like, the thread ended up being like, and then they came to America, and then they like my family had to rebuild itself, and America is a great country because I'm 2 generations away, and they came here, they didn't speak a word of English, and now I'm a venture capitalist or whatever the fuck she said. And it was incredible that it started with my grandfather, my great-grandfather had the monopoly of eggs.
That's up there with the person who was like, Castro took away my family's plantation and all its workers.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
Oh.
Anyway,
boy.
yeah, I feel you, Rob. I do.
But now that we do have a new game, do you feel like they found something?
Patrick has a daughter.
There
He's
was a look midway through that question of like, yep, here we go.
Just bring Jessica on the show.
Yeah,
Honestly, yeah.
Let Jessica free hashtag free Jessica.
Let her speak.
Let her speak.
Let her speak. He can't hear us because
No.
he's not at his computer.
Yeah. This is so real.
Oh, this gives me an opportunity to quickly hit play on this Joe Biden clip.
Oh
not
God,
good.
is he alive? Is he on
Camera
camera?
green screen.
That's not a green screen. It's just a weird camera setup.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's absolutely like a long lens
Yeah, I can see it.
and weird lighting.
All right, we'll give it one more try. Sorry.
All good, all good.
We have a new policy, Pat. You have to bring Jessica on the podcast.
I will the
No,
next
no.
time she comes in. I will just forego all attempts to get rid of her, and
Yeah.
I will just let her say hello.
Oh, wait, this is a different video. Sorry.
Anyway,
Oh God.
don't worry. Don't worry.
All
Yeah,
good,
don't
all
worry.
good.
Ignore
This is
that.
all cut. This is all cut. I am recording. Is everyone recording?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now I'm recording.
All right. Did Cado explain time.is to you?
Oh no, I just knew that there was a clap, but let me go
There
to
is a
time
clap.
that is.
Time.is.
Got it.
Yeah. We're to top of the minute? Or not top of the minute. That's not true at all.
That
I'm very
happened
tired.
10 seconds.
Top of the
ago.
top of the.
I meant top of the 10 seconds. Is
Yeah.
what
No, I
meant.
heard you. I was ready for it.
I know you were. We connected.
That's where we need to lay. That's the next layer of challenge is solving a puzzle
If I-
before,
Right.
like, to know what the time is.
to know what the time is. Or fuck that. We just all sync on
Quarter
like,
after.
This is
What does
it.
it mean?
Yeah,
25 seconds.
exactly. Exactly.
If a decade is 10 years, is 10 seconds a decade?
I hate you. Let's do 43 seconds.
Ooh. Okay.
That was too much time. See? It's
Well,
fine.
it froze for me, so I just.
Yeah.
had to,
Oh, Rob's
kinda-
camera's back.
Rob's camera is back.
Yeah, it's got a cool Dutch angle. Unlike
Sick.
one of the
Wow.
bad guys.
It's the
in
gamer
Batman
angle.
TV series. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right.
What is that? Is that a light?
Yes.
What?
Okay.
Oh, back there.
Yeah.
I thought it was some sort of very large instrument.
Yeah.
That probably, but like, if things get really bad here, it could be a weapon. I feel like
Could be
that's
Totally.
Could be.
that's a blood. That's like some
It
sort
is
of
very
bloodborne.
Yeah.
What are they called? What are the weapons called in that? The
Trick weapons, right?
trick
Yeah.
weapons. That could be a trick
Yeah.
weapon. Those bulbs pop.
Oh, God.
Little swords come out of them when you hit R1.
True. Yeah,
Yeah.
love it.
Yep.
Great. All right. I'm going to do an intro, and then we're going to come in, and it's going to be good.